Thank you so much for that very generous introduction. For those of you I've had the chance to meet before, you've often heard me say, simply saying Brad from Kanawha would suffice because I believe that says it all. I want to thank the Charleston Area Alliance. I want to thank the university presidents, both senators, the governor, the mayor, for those very warm and introductory comments. And my heart and prayer is also going with the family of Officer Johnson. But I have to say that I am humbled today to have the opportunity to be with this group, this amazing and inspiring group of thought leaders and change agents. And as you heard in the introductory comments and just my comment a few minutes ago, I grew up in the little town of Kanawha, population 3,000 if you round up, just southwest of Charleston. I had an idyllic childhood, amazing parents. My mother is still with us, two great brothers and friends that have lasted a lifetime. I'm incredibly proud to be from West Virginia. Everywhere I've ever lived in this country and every place I've traveled around the globe, I've told our story. And as proud as I am of West Virginia and of all those people who invested in shaping me and contributing to anything I've ever accomplished, I believe the time has come for us to reimagine and to transform ourselves. And in doing that, to prepare the next generation of West Virginians for this exciting future that's unfolding around us. You heard reference to my wife, Elise, and our Wing to Wing Foundation. When we started the foundation, we had a very simple goal: to power possibility, to inspire hope and dreams, and to do that through three key drivers: education, entrepreneurship, and the environment. And I believe we now sit at a strategic intersection. At an intersection when our state's most valuable assets, which are you, our people, and our beautiful surroundings, our natural environment, intersect perfectly with the four trends that are shaping the 21st century. The first trend is a trend towards entrepreneurism, and our major universities are leaning in to build this into our educational curriculum. And why this is so important today is studies have shown 75% of those young men and women who are graduating today don't want to work for another company. They want to start and own their own business. And the other reality is, for those of us who understand economic development, 75% of all jobs in every economy in this country and around the globe were created by startups. So that is an important trend that our universities and our K through 12 school systems are leaning into. The second trend is an increased emphasis on experiential learning, or something called design thinking, inspiring in our young students and in our college students the desire to learn entrepreneurial skills, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, but do it in a much more hands-on experience as opposed to memorizing and then trying to regurgitate something on a test. And this is being really showcased through programs like the Science Adventure School and the Science Through Sports programs that West Virginia University is doing, and through the design thinking curriculum that Marshall University is teaching. Now, why is this so important? It's because scientists have studied the brains of young boys and girls who were born after the invention of the iPhone in 2007, and they've discovered two distinct differences in how their brains had formed, different than any other generation before them. The first, they possess the ability to do something called continuous partial attention. They can do multiple things simultaneously with equal precision. That's never been physiologically capable of any other generation before them. But there is a flip side to that coin. The average attention span of a student just 10 years ago was 12 seconds. Today, it is 8 seconds. And a goldfish's average attention span is 9 seconds. So if we don't reimagine our approach to education, we will lose the opportunity to capitalize on these amazing new gifts, and we will potentially lose the interest of these young men and women. The third shift is a shift towards remote work. Now, this was a shift that was already alive and well before COVID. Going into COVID, 23% of Fortune 500 employees could live anywhere they wanted and do their job remotely. However, as I sit in the Business Council, which is the top 150 CEOs in the country and around the globe, their forecasts are coming out of COVID, that number will be closer to 40 to 50%, which gives new communities an opportunity to participate in getting these individuals to move into their state. Which takes me to the fourth and final trend, and that is a shift in geographic preference. Rural has become the new urban. Recent studies show that millennials living in San Francisco, New York, Boston, Chicago want to move to a more rural setting where they have shorter commute times, a lower cost of living, a stronger sense of community, and be surrounded by outdoor activities that they can participate in. Those four important trends are shaping the 21st century. And here we sit. Here West Virginia sits right in the middle of this intersection with an emerging group of entrepreneurs coming through our school system, the descendants of mountaineers who settled these mountains by blazing trails instead of following paths. And that's the very DNA that makes up an entrepreneur. And we're surrounded by these mountains, these rivers, these trails that once served as walls and barriers, but they now serve as welcome signs as geographical preferences become more centered on rural as opposed to urban settings. And finally, an unparalleled alignment of interests, an alignment of interest between West Virginia natives who are coming back and giving back their time, their talent, their treasure, an alignment of interest between our elected officials on both sides of the aisle and between our major universities and state colleges, all leaning in to seize this moment. And this is our moment to shine. And it's an opportunity for us to do it through many initiatives. And one of those initiatives is the Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative. Our goal for this effort is very simple. The first, to inspire in our youth the desire to learn these entrepreneurial skills and STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, but to do it through experiential learning, design thinking, outdoor activities, which instills in them a sense of pride for the state they live in. And the goal is simple: to stop the brain drain of our best and brightest thinking they have to leave our state to pursue a job or a career. The second goal, to attract others who already have these entrepreneurial skills to move to West Virginia through our remote worker program and to bring with them their jobs, their talents, their family, and their purchasing power to strengthen our economy and our communities. And then the third goal, to use those assets to invest in our infrastructure, broadband connectivity, outdoor recreational assets. So as a collective state, we get stronger and more vibrant. Now, when you hear about the Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative and you listen to some of the opening comments, Senator Capito mentioned many other initiatives: N4, Core 10, Facebook, Virgin Hyperloop. And I will tell you, as a proud West Virginian, what makes me most excited is every one of the architects behind each of those initiatives is working together because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And together we're leaning in against one singular goal: to reposition West Virginia as the startup state. Gang, our time has come. We have the opportunity to seize this moment and to show the world that this is absolutely almost heaven. And it is a privilege for me to have the opportunity to work alongside so many talented individuals such as you and the others that we heard opening up this speech today. And I can't wait for us to turn this vision into reality. So with those set of opening comments, it is a real privilege for me to welcome Laura Martin, who will be facilitating the fireside chat today, as well as taking questions from you. So with that, Laura, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Brad, and welcome back to West Virginia. I know that we're trying to do this fireside style, and it looks like the cabin where you're positioned right there looks like you might have a fireplace nearby. So I hope that you are well and comfortable, and thank you for the time today. I wanted to start out asking a question that, I know the title of this event is about trailblazing the future of the Kanawha Valley. And when I think about trailblazing the future, I really think about the recent $25 million gift that you and your wife Alice made to WVU this fall. A few of the speakers have alluded to that already. I consider that to be the epitome of blazing the trail. You just talked about the three goals of your program. You talked about your vision is repositioning West Virginia as the startup state, but is there anything else that you wanted to share just about your vision for that real trailblazing vision to make West Virginia different than anywhere else in the country?
Well, thank you, Laura, for the opening question. And yes, it actually is my home at the Greenbrier. We had a Thanksgiving here, and we're enjoying a week before we celebrate Elisa's birthday this weekend and then head back to California for a couple of weeks. But to answer your question, the whole initiative was designed to be one of the many catalysts to help ignite this next chapter for West Virginia as the startup state. And the simple goal is to empower in our current group of entrepreneurs that are growing up and coming through school the belief and the ability to say you don't have to leave our state to pursue a career. It's also to give West Virginia more options than simply competing for these companies who may be opening a manufacturing plant or an office and saying, I hope we can make it to the top of the list. In fact, what we want to do with this gift is to put our destiny in our own hands, start our own companies, grow our own entrepreneurs, recruit those who already have these skills to move into our state, capitalize on the collective group of all those things to help reposition this state and take control of our future. And that's really the whole purpose and the reason why we wanted to trailblaze with this effort in conjunction with all the other exciting things that you've heard about.
Great. Well, thank you. And I know we all have, COVID fatigue right now, and throughout this pandemic, we've seen incredible innovation already and witnessed people and companies creating new ways to work and new ways to do business. So you talked about some of these trends that you were already seeing, but was this initiative already on your mind, or did the pandemic really end up being the driving force?
Yeah, Laura, that's a great question. I think for all of us who've been around for a while, we know that market disruptions, whether it was Y2K or the dot-com bust, or it was the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, or you come along now to the Great Pandemic, those things tend to accelerate efforts that were already underway and simply move them forward 3 to 5 years. And the same can be true about this vision. For those who've had the chance to spend some time with me since I've been out in California, I've been coming back to West Virginia regularly. My mom, my brothers, aunts and uncles, everyone still live here in Wayne County. And when I would come back, I would talk about the pride that I have and we have in our past. And our past was, of course, that we were able to take resources out of the ground, create energy that literally this entire nation was powered by for more than a century. But I also believe that as proud as I am of our past, our future is no longer just in the ground, it's now in the clouds. It's in the clouds with these devices in the palm of our hand called smartphones and Apple Watches and the command of our voice with Alexa and Siri and Cortana and this thing called big data. And so for us to really participate in this next chapter, I sensed that we were going to have to transform ourselves. And we have this cliche or this adage out in the Silicon Valley, which is the best experiment to run is one that someone else already ran for you and proved that it could be successful. So I really started to go on this vision quest to say, has anybody else been in circumstances like West Virginia where things were shifting and were they able to successfully make it to the next chapter? And so I studied Ireland, who went through the same thing as West Virginia, happens to be our sort of forebears, the Scots-Irish settled here. They're now the Celtic Tiger, one of the fastest growing economies in Europe. Studied Israel, which is now known as the startup nation. Even though they're one of the smallest countries in the world, they're ranked 6th in producing startups out of that very small country. Studied India and France following suit, and then came back and we studied Pittsburgh and Detroit. And then I began to study cities, Bentonville, Arkansas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Vermont, and saw that they were starting to do something no one else was doing. Instead of hoping that Amazon or some other company would pick them to put their second headquarters, they began to go after the employees of these companies. And I said, there's got to be something there. And so that was when in 2018, I reached out to Tulsa and found out that George Kaiser and his family foundation had funded this thing called Tulsa Remote. And I went deep, began to really study what was it that they learned. I studied all the other programs that had been tried, many of which had failed. And I tried to understand what were the things that were necessary for this to be successful. And since that time, I've been talking to people in West Virginia, and West Virginia University was doing something very similar. So we joined forces, and the rest was history in terms of the announcement. So I know that was a long answer to a short question, which is the vision was already there. COVID set the stage, and now we're accelerating much faster, and we're seizing the moment.
I think that was an excellent answer. I appreciate that you took the time to go through that background. That's certainly helpful for me and hopefully for our audience as well. My next question is about the Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative. And it's going to be designed to ignite West Virginia's economy and develop world-class recreational infrastructure, expand outdoor education opportunities. And I was wondering how you specifically see this program stimulating entrepreneurship and economic development in the state. And are there any specific recreational infrastructure or outdoor opportunities that you have in mind?
Yeah, so I'll start first with some of the levers that I talked about in my opening comments. The first is to grow the next generation of entrepreneurs. And whether it's a simulated workplace program happening through our VOTEC initiatives in high school, or it's the great work happening at the major universities and the state colleges, it's work happening with N4 and Core 10. A lot of people investing efforts to say, let's ensure that we give our students the opportunity to learn the skills necessary so they will stay in the state and build the next Cisco, the next Intuit, the next Amazon. But then we could go underneath what we learned at Tulsa. I'm going to put this into context. Tulsa, Oklahoma decided they were going to take advantage of hiking trails and bike trails. They didn't have some of the other assets West Virginia has, but they said hiking trails and bike trails. And they were going to create a situation where they wanted to recruit 50 people to move into Tulsa. Just by advertising 50 people moving to Tulsa with a lower cost of living, a great community, and hiking and bike trails, they got 10,000 applications from 50 states and 130 countries. So then they said, let's co-locate these individuals side by side so that people from Apple can sit next to Google and Facebook and Intuit and Cisco, and they'll form friendships in a community, and hopefully that'll make them want to stay. And they have. More than 83% have stayed. And then what started to happen is they start to form these relationships and say, why don't we start a business right here together? And so you get startups happening. And then they tell their friends in the company they work for, hey, you've got to move here. This is incredible. And then the company starts saying, why are all my employees wanting to move to this place? And they start thinking about opening an office. And it creates this flywheel effect. So I believe fundamentally, we can take that idea and we can expand on it. Because when you look at other assets, and we studied Salt Lake City, known as the Silicon Slopes, where all the engineers and designers from California fled to have better access to outdoor recreation and a lower cost of living. We studied Colorado and the Whitewater Rapids. We studied Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Bentonville, Arkansas for hiking and biking trails. And if you notice, they all have one thing. Now think of West Virginia. We've got it all. And we are close to 2/3 of the nation's population. We have something no one else can match. And all we have to do now is execute, and we're going to.
I like your optimism, and I have to ask, this may, show any biases perhaps, but I'm sitting here in Kanawha County. I was actually born in Tucker County. You were born in Wayne. You're in Greenbrier today. So we've got this great state. Are there any specific regions of the state that you think lend themselves more readily to this type of program, or is it fair game for everyone?
You know, it's a wonderful, wonderful question. And the answer first is, when we wanted to start this effort, we said we want 55 counties strong. Everyone's going to have a part to play in this effort. But that being said, we have studied those that have tried this and failed, and there have been quite a few. And we've studied those that have done this and succeeded. And we've been able to codify the things that have to be in place for certain parts of the program to work. So I'll start by saying not every one of these communities and not every one of these counties will have a co-working facility day one, because we've learned that you have to have things like Whitewater Rapids and rock climbing and bike trails and hiking trails. You need to have access to broadband and an education system. You need to have a diversity of restaurants. You need to have a lot of things in place. And so we'll probably pick 1 or 2 locations that already have all those things in place now to get started. But what's happening is Chelsea Ruby with the governor's office, working with West Virginia University, is spending time to investigate every single corner of the state. And they're setting up a counseling or a consulting program to work with every community leader to help them in the readiness program and help them understand how they can participate. Because at the end of the day, it's going to take all of us to make this successful, because we collectively are West Virginia.
I appreciate that. And when it's in Chelsea's hands, it's in good hands. So absolutely. I wanted to ask that, I know you have 2 daughters of whom you are incredibly proud. Has watching them grow into the smart and talented, hardworking young women that they are been part of the impetus for your desire to attract this type of young talent back to West Virginia, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind at all. I never mind having an opportunity to talk about my daughters. They're the loves of my life. They're the epitome of their mother. And that's why I'm surrounded by these 3 beautiful women that humble me every day. And I live to serve them. And I mean that sincerely. And it is yes, and Not only did I hope that we could create opportunities that would inspire them and their generation to come and discover what I actually enjoyed when I was a kid growing up in West Virginia, the beauty surrounding us, the kindness of these people, but I also wanted to go back and learn from my own lessons. I describe my childhood in Kanawha as being idyllic. And yet, if you look at my social media account, it says I'm just a boy from a small hometown who spent 22 years dreaming of a way out and every day since looking for a way home. I don't ever want another West Virginian to feel like that's the only option they have. I want us to give our young men and women an opportunity to say, you can build it here, you can work for those companies here, or you can choose to go chase your dreams and then come back when you're ready. But opportunities will be available for you. And that really has been the impetus. And I have to say, the more this program has taken structure, my daughters, their fiance of one of my daughters, their friends are all saying, when can we enroll? So I'm excited. I think this is going to be game changing.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure that they are looking forward to opportunities that are set in front of them in life as well. Hopefully it is in West Virginia, but we'll see. I wanted to shift gears a little bit, and one of the questions that has come through from our audience is actually a question similar to something that I was already planning to ask you. So I wanted to shift gears and talk a little bit about one of the Charleston Area Alliance's strategic goals, which is to create an inclusive environment where people want to live, work, and play. And as you know, of course, an inclusive environment means communities and workplaces that accept and represent peoples of different colors and cultures and lifestyles. So from your experience, what are the benefits of an inclusive environment? And on the other side of the coin, what are the dangers of not fostering an inclusive environment?
Yeah, Laura, this is so mission critical today, not only for society in general, for our country and for our state, but also for this program we're talking about. So diversity is a fact. You look around and you see we live in a diverse world. Inclusion is a choice. And whether you're leading a company, a nonprofit, a university, or you're a part of a state, you have to create a welcoming environment. And by the way, it is good. It has been proven that it drives greater innovation, better decisions, better business results, faster growth. In fact, if you actually look at what the Special Forces, the Navy SEALs and others use as a training program, they have these things called survival exercises, where they will give an individual and then a group of individuals a list of 12 items, and they put you in this sort of scenario where they say you're stranded in the desert. You have to stack rank the most important item to the least important item to make it across the desert and still be alive. And they give every individual 30 minutes to come up with their 1 through 12. It takes the average individual 10 minutes, and they're sure they got it right. And then they take that individual and they put you with 3 of your peers for a group of 4, and they give you 90 minutes to get your list of 12, their list of 12, and come up with agreements on what's the right 1 through 12. It takes the average group 2 hours. They need a 30-minute extension. And usually half of them have pushed away from the table. They've closed their arms. They're frustrated. They're angry. But then here's the catch. No matter how many times you run this test, the highest scoring individual scores on average 10 points lower than the lowest scoring group. So diversity requires us to embrace different ways of thinking, to embrace different philosophies, religions, sexual orientations, political beliefs, to seek to understand before we seek to be understood, but the power is in the outcome. And now to answer your question on what's the downside if you don't have it, not only will you have less innovation, less effective decisions, and slower results, but as we studied those programs that failed at this remote worker program, the number one reason they failed was the communities were not welcoming to differences, and they didn't cater to those differences. And we're already hearing some of this as we have people looking at the program as, hey, do you have sushi restaurants? Do you have Whole Foods? Do you have a way for us to be a vegan or a vegetarian and live in West Virginia? And those are just some of the examples of what we'll have to embrace to welcome people in. But West Virginia, I've often said, if my car ever broke down anywhere, I want it to break down here because people are kind enough to stop and crafty enough to help us get that car fixed. I know we can make that adjustment. We just have to let people know we're open for business.
And as someone who has had a car break down here in West Virginia, I can personally attest to that. Absolutely. I wanted to ask one kind of closing question, because I imagine that in our virtual audience today, before I get to our participant questions, I imagine that we have a number of community leaders and policymakers. And so what advice would you give to them on how they and how we can blaze our own trails and position our state, position the Charleston area, Kanawha County, the greater Kanawha Valley area as the area that people are clamoring to relocate to for the perks of the outdoor recreation and the stability of a healthy economy and that inclusive community we just talked about?
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear communities that have reached out, hey, we really want to know what we can do in our area to be a part of this program, and how can we get ahead of this and really make sure that we've hit the ground running. And I would say for all of those, every one of us are going to need each other, and we're going to do that, and we need to do it together. But the first thing I would encourage us to do is to learn from the best wheel makers, to study the programs that have succeeded, to study the programs that have failed, to work with Chelsea Ruby, with West Virginia University to say, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that I come out of the gates with the highest probability of success? That's the first thing. The second thing would be then just deviate and differentiate only where necessary. It used to be called plagiarism. Now it's called benchmarking. We're allowed to do this. We're allowed to copy and paste, and then differentiate in areas that we know no one else can match, which is our people and our natural resources. God gave us these resources. You can't build mountains. You can't buy mountains. And so we have the opportunity to capitalize on what we already have. But the final point that I would offer for anyone who's thinking about this is to recognize if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. It is so important for us to play this as an orchestra. Some of us will bring drums, some of us will bring trumpets, some of us will bring trombones, some of us will bring strings. But if we don't play the same sheet of music, we're going to make a bunch of noise and get booed off stage. So it's important for all of us to know that we need to have a singular plan. We need to work in concert. We need to realize that we're all playing as a state, and let's figure out the role that each of us play, and then all 55 counties will be strong.
That is very sound advice, and I hope that all of us listening today take that to heart and move forward with that. I do want to get to a couple of questions from our audience. This first one is from Dalton Tyler, and Dalton is asking that as consumers or professionals, how can we attract more businesses to invest remote opportunities into the Charleston area?
Dalton, thank you for the question. You know, I often get asked this. It's either about venture capitalists and how do we get them to come and pay attention to us, or it's about companies coming in. And both of them follow the same thing: talent and ideas. If you have world-class talent and you're growing them through your education system and you're teaching them the skills of the 21st century, companies are going to want to relocate here, and they're going to want to build offices here. And the same thing goes with ideas. If you create entrepreneurs that are coming out of our high schools and our colleges and universities, and they begin to create these ideas, venture capital money follows good ideas. And so if we can do those two things, if we can focus on our talent, and if we can focus on generating ideas, the companies will follow, and the venture capital money will follow as well. And it's as basic as that. It's not an overnight thing, but I think this program will help shine the light on West Virginia, along with other things like Virgin Hyperloop and the Facebook initiative and N4 and Core 10 and all the others. We're already getting a lot of attention. Now we just have to demonstrate that we're committed to it for the long term.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know you have a passion for education, Brad, and one of the participants, Jim McJunkin, wants to know he's seeking your advice on how do we improve our education system to allow our children to rise up to meet the challenges and achieve the goals that you've mentioned.
Yeah, this is a passion. It's an area that I've had the chance to spend a lot of time learning from the best wheel makers, or those who are actually further ahead around the globe. And we've studied all kinds of different programs. There's a wonderful book written by Clay Christensen, who was an amazing Harvard Business School professor that wrote books about the innovator's dilemma, the innovator's solution, about market disruption. And he wrote one called The Innovative University, where he actually critiqued the existing education system, even though much of it has been shaped by Harvard. And if you break it down, there are 4 skills and 4 different approaches to education that I call the 4 Ds and the 4 Cs. Now, my mother would say that might sound like my report card, but let's just go with the fact the 4 Ds are the skills, the 4 Cs are the approaches to education. I'll go through them very quickly. There are 4 fundamental skills that we need to make sure our education system around the world, and especially in West Virginia, is focused on. The first is discovery-driven thinking or design thinking. No more developing a spreadsheet and thinking it's going to come true, but instead developing multiple scenarios, a low case, a base case, a high case like we have in COVID, and teaching our young students to get ready with multiple options on how to solve a problem. The second D, after discovery-driven thinking, is developer acumen. This does not mean that every student has to become an engineer, but just as we had to learn to write in cursive, even though some of us didn't become poets and journalists, every student should have a class or 2 on how to express their ideas in code so they have a better understanding of how technology interacts in the world. The third D is design, also known as the arts. Technology is complex, it's intimidating. There's a reason why Apple outsells Android, because it's so easy to use that my mother can use it. And then the fourth D is data. There isn't a company, there isn't anyone who's walking around not trying to measure their health through something like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch. You need to understand how to get truth out of the data. So those are the 4 things we need to make sure our education system has: discovery-driven thinking, developer acumen, the arts and design, and then ultimately data. And then the way we need to think differently about approaching education is the 4 C's. Connected classrooms. Distance learning is no fun when it's the only option, but going to the future, we will have a mix of classroom and online education, and we need to make sure every corner of our state, every home and every holler has broadband connectivity. The second C is the focus on competency, not credit hours. Today, half of the students who graduate from college are not ready for the jobs in the Silicon Valley. We have to focus on teaching them the skills and making sure they graduate with skills that employers need. The third C is making sure we're focusing on accreditation. In other words, instead of having half of our students drop out and then call them college dropouts, even though they're carrying student debt, give them credit for the 1 or 2 years and help that be something that will help them get a job. So these are called micro credentials or accreditation. And then the fourth is community. And very simply, we should be having our students solve the problems in our local communities instead of doing a case study on Acme widgets. We should bring the local businesses' problems into the classroom, let the student practice their skills, and let the business benefit. And those are the 4 C's. So I know there's a lot in there, but there is a blueprint, and we've been able to study it from others who have reinvented the education system. And I think in West Virginia, there's a lot going on now to make this a reality.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that the educators that are watching this were taking notes, especially about the book that you mentioned and your D's and C's. I appreciate that. I think I have time for one more question from our audience. So Hampton Coakley wants to know, what specific industries or trends do you think would give startups originating in the Kanawha Valley a competitive advantage?
You know, this is great. I often get asked, what kind of business should I start? And what's interesting is the thing that I always challenge our teams to think about is look around you at a big, important problem that's not being solved well by an existing solution, and then begin to run experiments to see if you can find a way to solve that better than anyone else. Now, we have natural assets that may give us a leg up. So we have energy, so we could do startups in energy. We have amazing things going on with healthcare right now. We could do some things in healthcare. We've got a lot of opportunities to think about how we can capitalize on our outdoor recreational assets. But the truth is, you don't have to be beholden to the assets that are sitting in West Virginia. What you have to do is identify a better way to solve a problem that no one else is solving today, and then come up with a way to do that that no competitor can match. So Google, when it started search, wasn't the first search engine. Yahoo led search, but if you look at the Yahoo page of old, it was a bunch of links. And when you looked at Google, it was simply one open box where you typed in your word, and they immediately took market leadership. So it's about finding a better way to solve a problem that people are struggling with.
So that doesn't restrict us to, industries in the Kanawha Valley. That could literally be a problem anywhere across the globe that we might be able to find a solution to right here.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, I know that we're running up against the end of our hour. So do you have any closing remarks that you wanted to make before I turn it back over to Jordan? I really have enjoyed this chat, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Laura. The only thing I will say as a closing comment is when the wagon trains are trying to settle this country and head west, only the hardiest of the hardy were able to stay here in West Virginia and settle here. This topography was harsh. And I think God created a very special breed when he created West Virginians. He created individuals that chose to blaze trails instead of follow paths. And that's what makes up a DNA of an entrepreneur. I believe we were tailor-made to be the startup state. And all we have to make sure we have are policies and laws that are friendly to startups, commitment to having broadband. I'm usually not a single issue person. I believe the world's too complex to focus on one thing, but very seldom in our lifetimes will we have one thing that impacts everything else. And right now, broadband is the key to success for distance learning, for telemedicine, for remote work, for entrepreneurs starting a business, and for companies wanting to move into our state. So if we can really lean in and tackle those things, there is nothing that can hold us back, because we have a durable competitive advantage that cannot be created anywhere else, which is our people and our natural resources. Let's do this.
Well, thank you, Brad. I can tell that you are so proud of your West Virginia roots, and every native West Virginian who listened to your closing remarks sits a little bit taller, feeling very proud. So thank you again. Jordan, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Laura.